Good afternoon. It's a pleasure for me to be here and be able to talk to you about a relatively new crop, the Rhodes grass. This experiment is conducted in the low desert at the Desert Research and Extension Center. And I will be talking, to that effect. I don't mean Rhodes grass would not be adaptable or would not be grown in other, regions. So for some of you who may be wondering what the low desert is, I would like to give you, a little background as to what it is. Well, this is, a common name for the desert regions in California. And that includes, but it is not exclusive to the Colorado, Utah deserts in Southern California. It actually, includes the heavily irrigated Coachella, Valley, Imperial Valley, parts of San Diego, and Riverside counties, and just a small portion of San Bernardino, County. It is actually the low desert is distinguished from the adjacent northern high deserts by latitude, elevation, climate, and native plant communities. And the region experiences excessively, hot summer temperatures. And it is almost, next to, the Death Valley in terms of, the excruciating heat conditions of, the low desert. So the Rhodes grass, the plant is actually termed, scientifically as Chloris guyana, and it is also named as, Chloris abyssinica, and probably relating to the origin where it comes from. It is a C4 perennial, native grass to Africa, but it is now widespread in tropical and subtropical, countries. It is very closely related to Bermuda grass. And morphologically, the Rhodes grass stems are tender, very leafy, and it spreads through, stolons, and those are actually highly productive in nature. And it is, in those countries where it is grown, naturally and so on, they are actually valued for, ability to set, seeds, relative ease of, establishment, ability to cover ground in a short period of time, and tolerance for drought, light frosts, and soil salinity. So those are the desirable, characteristics Rhodes grass does have. In the Arabian Peninsula, they tested that, Rhodes grass varieties produced significantly higher dry mass than alfalfa cultivars, and those are, very much close to, in terms of the climatic conditions, to the low deserts we have here. So the salt tolerance is, very interesting in Rhodes grass. The possession of, salt glands in the is actually the mechanism by which Rhodes grass is said to tolerate, salinity problems. The leaves can actually secrete both, sodium and the potassium ions through their leaves. So the ability, as you can see from the graph, is this a pointer? Oh, as you can see from here, is higher, for sodium than actually, potassium. You can see that sodium tolerance or excretion actually increases as the dosage with what they used, sodium chloride, increases. Very amazing. All right, so this is one of the area in Pakistan, a very salty and saline soil, and the crop actually looks something like this. So with these characteristics, we were interested to test the adaptability and the yield of Rhodes grass under the low desert condition. The research was conducted at DREC. DREC stands for the University of California Desert Research and Extension Center. It is in Holtville, California area. So probably, as far I know, this may be, the first of its kind in conducting Rhodes grass research, at least in California. So we tested two varieties, and those are known as, Gulf Cut and the Recliner. This is, the property of, or the proprietary of Selected Seeds of Australia. And they state that the previous Rhodes grass, the wild, varieties, were inconsistent in terms of, feed banks. So those ones are actually varieties that were hybridized and optimized as, fine-stemmed leafy plant of aggressive stolon, growth habits, salt tolerance, and high dry matter yields. Our objectives are simply to evaluate adaptability under the low desert at this time, and then test the forage yield and the nutritional values of those two varieties. So the plot layout and the planting included, the plots were actually with randomized complete block design with 4 replications. We used 18 pounds of seed per acre, and then simply broadcasted. We established, the seedlings with a sprinkler irrigation, and then shifted into flood irrigation. Fertilizers, we used 120 pounds per acre nitrogen as pre-plant, and then just, 50 pounds per acre nitrogen after subsequent cuttings. The pre-plant, phosphorus and the potassium are applied at 40 to 50 kilograms per acre. All right, so the harvesting or the cutting was done when the crop developed 5 to 10 flower heads. All right, the results, as you can see, in the table, we did actually two consecutive year trials. This is the first, yield data. There were 6 cuttings in that year, and there are no significant differences between, any of the two varieties. And I just, extrapolated this into the graph for simplicity. As you can see, the yield, the biomass yield was actually declining over, the cutting seasons, and the biomass yield declined through the cutting cycles. And annual yield, as you can see, is also very close, but it produced about 18 for Gulf Cut, and then about 19 tons per acre for, the Recliner. So pretty good yield. And the second year, we only had, 5 cutting. As you can see, there is not really much of a difference between, the two varieties. And, extrapolating, that table into a graph shows, some variable biomass yields, different from the first year, but still, there is similar trend in that, the yield declines, throughout the cutting cycles. So the total annual yield that we got for the second one was about 11 tons per acre from both, varieties. But note that this is only 5 cuttings. That was what was possible during the annual, cycle. All right, so I made some comparisons to the data that they have for the agricultural crops and crop report for the Imperial County, where the research was conducted, and this is what they have. Alfalfa hay, 7.19 tons per acre, Bermuda, clean grass, and then Sudan grass hay. So if you look at the biomass production of Rhodes grass, from the lowest to the highest, 11 tons to 19 tons, it is much more competent to any of those, forage crops. The exaggeration could be those are actually the, the data from commercial, farmers, but this is, from the research station. But still, you can see, a huge competence of Rhodes grass to the other forage crops. All right. So nutritional values, thanks to Dan Putnam's lab, they actually did the analysis. You can see, a lot of, quality analysis were made. There are no significant differences between any one of them at any of, the cuttings. And if you look at, the data, it also looks, very, competent. And then if you look at, the crude protein percentage, you can see, it ranges from 12 to 14%, crude protein content, which is very, valuable. So I also, looked at, the data, the previous findings, and then compared the grass, the Rhodes grass nutritional values. As you can see in all of those, it is either better or closely related to the other forage crops in terms of, those quality parameters. If you look at, the crude protein only, you can see that next to alfalfa, it is actually by far, higher, crude protein content compared to the grass forage crops. All right. Somebody asked Natalie if, how, comparisons of TAFE could be to some forage crops. This is, an ongoing trial that I'm doing now at the Desert Research and Extension Center. This is Rhodes grass, Bermuda, Klein grass, and TAFE. So you can see that, we did actually 3 harvests, and we tried to include moringa as a livestock feed. Moringa could not survive our summer temperature, so it was 0. But the others, you can see that Rhodes grass, in actual comparisons, we did with the same resource input, and then the same, crop maintenance. And you can see that Rhodes grass is by far better than, or better biomass production compared to the other forage crops. And the TAFE is actually the least. All right, so other desirable characteristics. One time I asked, the people to do, fertilizing, and then they went in with the tractor and damaged the whole field just to that extent. I thought it is not going to recover, but it came up to be, looking like this. So I think that is one of the desirable characteristics the Rhodes grass would have by tolerating mechanical damage. And this is, of course, the same field after it has recovered from that mechanical damage. All right, so another desirable characteristic is the suitability for pasture. We did not test this, but we got information from other areas. It is suitable for, rain-fed and irrigated systems. And it's highly desirable for direct pasturing. It is palatable to, livestock, and it is suitable for, many of the animals, including dairy, beef, horses, goats, and sheep. All right, almost done. All right, pest management. We did not see any trouble on Rhodes grass. There were no incidents of insect pests or pathogens detected in our research area. Weeds are not at all a problem. It actually showed, very strong, competent, crop to most of the weeds. But there are some broadleaf weeds that may need, attention. All right. In summary, Rhodes grass is easy to establish. It is highly salt tolerant and stress tolerant. There are rare pests and diseases. It well adapts to the low desert condition and produces high biomass of good nutritive quality. And it can be then an alternative forage crop for the low desert and even beyond. Even though this is done in the low desert, it may, I'm not discriminating that it may not survive or grow or produce high yield in other areas. It's already adopted by some growers in Imperial Valley for commercial production and even export to the United Arab Emirates already. So the future work will focus on resource use, estimation of production costs, and ultimately we plan to prepare a Rhodes grass production guidelines. All right, with that, I thank you for your attention, and I hope we'll be answering questions later on.